Hello, and welcome back to ScottyFullstack.com. I'm Scotty, and today we're going to be talking about a job posting / description that I found on Glassdoor.com this week by Cybercoders, which is here in Tampa for this role. A lot of remote roles that they have, a lot of different offices around the nation that they have, so definitely check them out. There's a lot to be had there. This particular role is advertised for a DevOps role, but I'd like to point out that this isn't really a traditional DevOps type posting. There's a lot of application in here. There's a lot of different type of application here, including front end, which is really good for all of us to know. Not to discourage you, I think a role like this can really help thrust you into a full career, and one that would really be explosive for skill set, for high salaries down the road. I mean, the more you know, the better. Really, here's what we got. We got AWS. They have REST API, Linux, Python, Bash, JavaScript, React, HTML, and CSS. So we're going to try to bundle these up as much as we can. In this video, what we're going to do is we're just going to do the AWS portion of this and focus heavily on that. I have the REST API that's with Python built and in my Docker repo. The link is in the description. Check that out. And then as well as the React, HTML, JSX, in this case has this React with it's JavaScript, so cover the JavaScript thing. And then with that's got a SAS SCSS file with it for styling. So there's that. The Linux and Bash piece we're not really going to do too much with, but for this video, what I want to really focus on is we're going to have in AWS, we're going to have our RDS backend, which is our Postgres database remote. We have our EC2 instance that's going to be running our Python Docker image with the REST API. And then we're going to have S3, a static hosted website for React. So it's going to be a lot of fun. React is going to call out to Python with Axios, and then Python's going to put it in the database, or it's going to read from the database and present it back to our front end. So you're going to get to see how all of that works. And hopefully you'll just come out of this with a better understanding of how to navigate the AWS console, and also how REST API interacts with a front-end app and how they're decoupled. That's really my goal. That's what I hope you'll get out of this. Note, I'm not going to be really doing Terraform in this. I've got one Ansible script I'm going to run that you'll have access to. It's, again, in the GitHub link below. But yeah, other than that, I'm going to try to do all of this in the console just so you can know AWS specifically. And there's a lot of Terraform stuff that's a lot of fun that we'll do later. And if these videos are helpful to you in any way, if you are enjoying this, be sure to like and subscribe. It helps me keep these going. It helps me know where everyone's at, what level my audience is. So thanks, guys. Appreciate you watching, and I hope that you enjoy this video. Let's start with the RDS instance. Okay, so let's head over to our RDS dashboard in our AWS console. We're going to need to keep RDS up, but we also need to open up our EC2. So once we open up EC2 in another tab, what we need to do first is set up a new security group that we're going to use with our RDS instance. When we create a Postgres or any relational database that is publicly accessible, which we're going to do for this tutorial, we need a security group right off the bat that's going to require in order to allow access to our Postgres instance. So you can call this whatever you want. I'm going to call it MyDB. Inbound rules, I'm going to add a rule. Go down to Postgres from anywhere. Now, I mentioned this in the blog post. I want to mention it here and just be very clear. This is not best practice security. We are allowing all access from anywhere to our instance, and if you had the username and password, you would be able to access that database. So it's recommended that you use like a Bastion host or just some other machine inside your VPC, restrict it down to your VPC, keep it network related so that nobody but those within your network can access this database, and apps and APIs can serve that information out. So just keep that in mind as we do this tutorial. Want to make sure security is at the forefront of our minds. So with that said, go back over to RDS, create database, and from here we're going to pick Postgres, and then scroll down. We're going to do free tier. We can name our database whatever we want, so like MyDB, and then I'm going to keep the Postgres master username. I'm going to auto-generate my password, and then come on down to connectivity. Keep default VPC. Subnet, it's going to be in the VPC. Publicly accessible, and then we want to add our DB. And you know what, we can actually remove default for this because I don't need it. Availability zone, no preference. Keep the port. Password authentication, of course you could always use IAM and or Kerberos if you were using those. I'm not going to be using those, so just password only for me. And then create database. So this is going to take just a few minutes to spin up. In the meantime, I am going to grab my credentials. If you randomly generated credentials, you're going to want to copy those here. I'm just going to echo those to a DB file. It's plain text, not encrypted, so this is for tutorial purposes only. And then for me, and then yeah, so it's going to stand up and create. So while that's creating, let's jump over to the GitHub that I have set up. So it's a repository for this tutorial specifically. Within it, here's my Django. What I want to show you here is within the RestAPI settings file. If I scroll down here, here we have an if-else statement for the database. So if we create a database and then we pass that database string to our Docker image as a variable, it's going to reference that database in this file. If we do not include that variable, it's going to just create a SQLite file that is going to be, it's not persistent, right? So it's going to be up with the container and it'll go down with the container and you'll lose all memory. So if you didn't want to create RDS, you could just do that and it would be fine. Those images are linked in this video below. They're also, if you just go over to my Docker, you have RestAPI and the basic React app. That's what we're using for this tutorial. And yeah, it's that easy. So again, I'm going to link all the references. There are 2 blog posts up, one for the React portion and one for the RestAPI. You should definitely check those out. They are linked below as well. And so in the meantime, we're going to go back to RDS. We're going to wait for our endpoint. So if yours is still creating, go ahead and pause your video. I'm going to pause mine, and when this endpoint pops up, we'll come back. All right, so my endpoint has popped up. Again, if yours is not yet, keep pausing and just wait. But once that endpoint pops up, then what we can do is we're going to want to take note of this because we are going to need it to add it to our EC2 coming up. And yeah, but that is actually it for the RDS section. We can, if we wanted to, we can, if I can come back here, we can test connectivity. And this job posting actually has Linux listed as one of the helpful things. So Telnet is a utility, that a Linux utility tool that you could use to check your connectivity from like wherever you are or whatever machine you are on to another. We can check and make sure that you're able to connect. And so that's what I'm going to do. So Telnet, my endpoint, and then the port 5432, hit enter, and I'm connected. So this is this means that I have connectivity through the firewall, i.e. the security group. And in a professional setting, this sort of thing comes up more than you want it to. So keep in mind, Telnet is a very quick way to check your connectivity and communication to a server from point A to point B. And if it connects, then your firewall is usually, in most cases, not every, but most cases, firewall is okay. So people like to throw firewall under all the time, and this is not a firewall issue if we were having issues connecting to this database. So yeah, so that's about it. Now let's hit the EC2 portion and then run our Django REST API on it. Okay, so let's head over to our EC2 dashboard. And in this particular case, we're going to be building a Ubuntu EC2 instance, T2 Micro in the free tier, that is going to host our Docker application for the Django REST API. So what you can do is go ahead and click Launch Instance, And then from here, we're going to scroll down, and if you wanted to, I mean, it'll probably be up here, but we can just select free tier only, so we know. I'm going to select Ubuntu Server 18. And then from here, yep, general purpose T2 micro. And then we could configure details, but we don't really need to in this case. We can just go ahead and launch it. And then key pair, if you don't have a key pair already, we can create a new key pair. I'm going to name this my Django, and then I'm just going to download that. So I got that downloaded. Launch instance. Now this won't take long. We can click View Instances, and we will see that coming up. But in the meantime, while that's happening, let's go down to security groups, and let's create a new security group. This, again, as I stated in the RDS section, we want to be cautious about security. In this case, we're using sort of an unconventional method of doing this. In most cases, you would use ECS for your container management within AWS, or you would use like Docker Swarm or Kubernetes. In this case, we're kind of just doing it in a way that we can keep it free tier and then also learn the basics of just common concepts with Docker, Bash, and in this case, Amazon EC2. So we're going to open this one way up. It's going to be very public, and so just take note of that. We want to be able to SSH just in case we need to, and also have it at port 80, which is HTTP, available to us to hit from our browser. So I'm just going to name this like web security group. VPC default is fine. Inbound rules I want to add. I want to do all TCP here from anywhere. And then I'm also going to, and again, be careful here, but I want to add SSH, which is port 22, and that from anywhere. You could select my IP, doesn't matter. I'm going to do from anywhere just so I have that accessibility. And then I'm going to go ahead and create. So that's going to fire up. And then here, our instance is now up. And what we can do now is go ahead and select it, actions, networking, change security groups. That was the default that we created with it. I'm going to go ahead and just select web. And there we go. So now we have our EC2 instance with our security group that we just created for web that opens up to the public. And we should now, once we get our Docker image bound to port 80, we can hit port 80 in our browser and see that. So now that we have our instance running, we have our web security group set up for that and making that very public. If you wanted to quickly reference how to connect, we have here, it tells us to change our key file to a chmod 400 permission, and then we also have this Ubuntu user that we can connect to that with. So we can close that out now. I'm actually going to copy that because I know we're going to need it for our Ansible file. So I have set up an Ansible provision script, and I also put an example host file here for you. This provision script we'll look at here in just a minute, and this is just going to quickly get our EC2 up and running. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going into detail about everything that I did, but just wanted to have that quickly there for you and I so we can get this moving. But let's go ahead and open up our Ansible file. And so here, what we need to do is under the web servers section, I want to add Ubuntu at my connection string, and then Ansible SSH key, private key file equals, and then it was .ssh, which is where it's going to be, my Django.pem. Okay, so then we can save that. And then what we want to do is come down here and we want to go ahead and move our downloads, my Django.pem to .ssh, chmod 400, .ssh Django React.pem, and there we go. So now that is set up. And what we can do at this point is I will go ahead and open up that file. And so inside this provision web server, the Ansible script, what we're doing is we're installing pip3, we're installing Docker, we're starting Docker, we are going to run the image with the parameter for the database like we spoke about in RDS, and that's going to be something I fill out right now. And then I'm having this migrate bash script, which if you check out the blog post, I'm going to link here in the bottom for this particular section of this tutorial. I will show you a little bit more detail about the bash script and understanding that. But for the meantime, we're just going to keep this as is. Essentially what it's doing is just grabbing the container, and then it's taking that container and it is execing into it and running a migrate on it so that we can use our API immediately without having to get in there. So from here, what I want to do is I have this database URL connection string for Postgres. We want to update this with our Postgres user. That's the user I created, at least. Use your root user there. The password, let me come back over to here. If I just cat db, because that's why I saved it there. If I grab that, come back. So let's go back down. The password here, that guy. The DB connection string is, if we come back to my RDS, go to DB instances, grab my DB, and then if I grab this endpoint that we created, then we'll come back here and paste that there. And then the port is the standard Postgres port 5432, and the database is Postgres. Cool. And then the port we're binding our 8000 from the application to port 80, and we're running the Scotty fullstack basic REST API image. Become is yes for all of these, and then of course, like I told you, we are going to migrate as soon as that deploys. So let's save that file, and let's come back here, from here, and we can do Ansible playbook provision web, and then run that. Add that. Now this should run through our tasks. So right now it's installing pip3. And this whole process is going to take a few minutes. So go ahead and run this and then pause, and we'll pick this back up as this completes. Once your Ansible script is finished up, what we're going to do is we're going to jump back over to EC2, and we are going to grab our public DNS. And we can just hit that right in the browser, and we're going to do /API because there is actually no root URL associated. So, and here we are. This is the Django REST framework basic UI that just comes out of the box, and we have a title, a description, and a price. And what we can actually do is we can do like my product description. This is my product, and then the price can be $5. Let's go ahead and post. And here we go. We have an object in our database. If you want, you can skip to the next section, or what we can do is, if you're just curious, let's go ahead and connect to our database and see that. So if I come back to RDS, we have this URL. Now, if you don't have like Postgres installed on your laptop, you should definitely do that. So -h, there's that, and then we want to do -u Postgres, and so that will ask for my password, which I very handily have here. Again, don't store your passwords in plain text. Don't be like me. And all right, so I'm connected to my Postgres database. If I wanted to at this point, I could do a /d to find my tables. Here within my tables, I have this products_product. So I'm going to use that, and what I can do is just do a quick select all from products_product, and there we go. My product is my product and $5. So we just successfully took our Django application, a REST API with the Django REST framework in an EC2 instance using Docker, and then we called out to the database, which is our Postgres database, and we posted that message into the database. Pretty cool stuff, right? So we have our title, description, and price, and the next piece is going to be taking the React portion, making it a static site in S3, and calling our product API, and then displaying this data in a meaningful way to a user. So let's jump over to React. Here we are at the React portion, and again in that GitHub repository we have a React folder. So if you're pursuing front end, like, it's an awesome library to learn, because it's right up there with frameworks like Angular or Vue. So definitely check it out. But what I want to do is just give you kind of just like a brief overview. There is another, again, like I said, a post in the description that you can check out if you are interested in learning a little bit more about the React piece. But within here, what we are really concerned about is that we do have a Docker image available to us. We're not going to use the Docker image for this particular tutorial. Like I said, you can pull that Docker image down and play with it as much as you want, but for the purposes of this, we're going to actually put this in a static S3 file and host it that way. It does cost 50 cents a month, but I don't think you'll keep it up very long, so just delete it if you don't care about paying, or if you don't want to pay 50 cents a month. Yeah, pretty convenient. So let's head over to the source folder. And within source, so what we have set up here is a components folder and a containers folder. Of course, we have our app.js file, and you'll see in the blog post what we do with that. That's sort of the initial application file that the index.js hits first. So really what we're going to be wrapped up in here is the components and containers folder, and for this tutorial, primarily the containers folder. So let's go into containers, and in here, I want to open up my home.js file. So from the home.js container, what we really want to look at here is our Axios, and that's just a quick tool that's going to help us do the fetch calls, for instance, like a get or a post of the RestAPI, or a delete in their case. And so here what we're doing is I'm just setting this Django REST framework URL. This is for Docker users. If you wanted to change the URL, you could build it with a process env. Otherwise, I'm just going to set this manually here for our S3 purposes to my public EC2 with the HTTP in front of it. And then that will get called here with the API route. That's going to be the get call, and then come down here and we have our delete call and a submit for a post call. Then from here, we're going to pass that data we're going to set it to state, so products res data, and that res data then in products gets sent to our component app. So we can head over to our component app, and in this case it would be list.js. And then the list here is going to take that prop that I sent over from the container, and it's going to map that product response data out into this particular block as many times as there's an item in an array. So we're going to have a product tile that's going to have the title, description, price, and then a button that will delete. And that delete function is actually back here, delete. So we take the ID and we call out to our API plus the ID of the object, and then we delete it and call Axios delete, and the result then triggers a window reload. So a lot of stuff going on here. Again, React is very specific tooling, and I can't do that in this video, but maybe I'll make another video about this particular React app, but there is, again, a blog post for you to use. So the tool that we're going to be using to push our our project up to the bucket is an authenticate in is AWS Vault. If you are not familiar with this, it's by 99 Designs and pretty easy to install on all of the operating systems. I've done this in a tutorial before. It was the DevOps 01 getting started with DevOps article, and that's also a video. You can learn more specific details about installing this if you have problems, but I'll link this link to the video, and you should just be able to go here and follow this. So if you haven't set that up, do that. But really what we want to do for that is create an IAM role. So I come back to my my AWS console. I want to go to IAM, and then from IAM, what we need to do is we need to permission this to have S3 admin rights. And so from here, we're going to go to users. We're going to select add user. I want to name this like, we can name it the same as our key, my Django, and then from here, we're going to add programmatic access only. Next. Add user to group. So I've set up a group previously. I call it Django S3 for me. You could create a group, and all it is just Amazon S3 full access. I'm going to provide that to mine. Don't need any keys, and then or tags. Sorry. And then create. Okay, so I want to. You can download your credentials if you want, or if it's just kind of like a one-time thing like me. So now what I want to do is head over to my terminal. I want to do AWS Vault add. You can name it whatever you want. I'm going to name mine Django. Access key. We're going to grab this, and then the secret access key is this. Okay. And that is now added. And now what I can do is just to test that out, vault exec Django, and I'm in. So I have access to S3 in my AWS console. So that's what we're going to be using for React. Come on back. Let's head over to S3 and wrap this portion up. And so I'm going to create a bucket. I'm going to name this my Django React. Oh, I gotta be hyphens. Django React tutorial, something like that. These are DNS names, so it's got to be unique. And then I'm not going to select anything from my buckets because I want to show you how to set those up. Versioning is fine. I'll keep that default. We want to not block public access. And then I acknowledge. Next. Create bucket. Okay, and I'm going to click into that. And now what we need to do is we need to set up a couple of things. So one, I want to go over to my properties, and I want to set this to enable static website hosting. Index HTML is going to be our entry point, and I'm not going to set up an errors HTML file. That can be for another time. And then we are good. So index.html. So now that's ready. Now let's do permissions. And then we're going to go to bucket policy. And from here, we can navigate over to our GitHub. And this is conveniently here for you. Again, this is very public, so take note of that. We're providing public access. I'm going to paste that here, and then we need to update this right here with our bucket name. So if I take this, just replace that section with my bucket name, we should be good. Save it, and now we are public. So that is what we need to do to set up our bucket. And now let's head back over to our React project. So if I go back into React, and then I can open up, what I want to open is my package.json file. And here what you want to do, and again, this is in the repository for a quick copy and paste, but I want to add my bucket name here. So this is a deploy step that we're creating. We're taking AWS Vault, which we just set up. We're execing into our AWS Vault profile. Then we are calling AWS S3 sync. We're gonna sync what's gonna be our build file, which I'll show you in a minute, to our bucket. So let's go ahead and I'll go over here, back here. It's easier. And we're going to go ahead and run that. All right, so we can run npm run build. And this is going to create a production-ready build folder for our React app. And when that's done, you can list, and you'll see there's a build folder here now. And then what we want to do is npm run deploy. And that's going to exec into our, as I said before, our new profile, and it's going to upload all of that build folder to S3. Mine's already done, but if you get an error here, you might need to close out your session and start a new one. If you had exec in before, it'll say something like nest with care. So now that that's done, let's head back here and refresh. And we should have our build folder here. And we have an index.html file right in the root level. So if I come back over here to my properties and then click static website hosting, we now have, it was there before, we can click this and this link, and this is where our application is going to be hosted. So here it is. This is a very simple React project. Add product, title, description, and price, and then a submit button. I had deleted my data that we had put in as test data, but if we re-added that, test, my test product, and then like $5 post. So I have this object here. Now if I come back and refresh my React app, we have successfully called out to our Django API and then retrieve that from the database, and now we're displaying it here. So we can actually do that now and test our post functionality with the form. And I can do test2, enter description. This is another test, and we can make this $6. Submit. It's going to reload, and now we have a test2, another test, $6, and a delete functionality, which if we tested that now works. So we have test, my test, that has shown up in my API. And so if we deleted that one, then we head back to the API, let's get, and now there's nothing there. So yeah, pretty cool stuff. You can always check your database like we did in the previous step and prove that it works. But yeah, play around with this. Again, I've put the Docker images in the Docker repo. You can pull those down. The code is in the GitHub. You can play with that. Check out the other blog posts. And as always, don't forget to subscribe and like if you find this helpful. I want to keep making things like this. I want to keep helping you. It took me a long time to get started. And I really want to just point out basic core concepts that will help you learn in practical ways. So like and subscribe, give me feedback, let me know how I'm doing, join the Slack channel, tell me there, ask questions. We're all in this together, we're learning, and I really hope to see you next time. So thanks for learning, thanks for being here, thanks for listening and watching, and look forward to the next video.